And today we're streaming via YouTube and not via the web radio, because we've had some technical issues with the web radio. But hopefully that's a positive change. I think it's a more common and an easier channel for a lot of our listeners to join us on YouTube. So that's the silver lining behind the dark cloud. And I also want to commence with an apology for the delayed start today. This is due to some personal reasons that we had to travel to Anuradhapura from Ingiriya for some treatment, and despite all that, we are now prepared to commence the sermon. So without any further ado, let us begin. If you have any issues with the stream, please do drop a comment either on Skype or on YouTube. This reminds me of the old days when these sermons used to be streamed on YouTube, and I will be able to pick up messages in case there are any issues affecting the quality of the audio stream. So either on the Skype chat group or via the YouTube chat feature, please let us know if there are any issues that are affecting your audio quality. Okay. So as always then, before we commence, let us remind ourselves that it is the Lord Buddha's Dhamma that we have this privilege of discussing, reflecting on, contemplating on and comprehending for the purpose of our salvation from samsara. Bearing that in mind, let us all pay homage to the Lord Buddha before we commence the sermon. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. And also before we commence, let us take this opportunity to invite all the devas, brahmas, spirits, demons and the dead, our ancestors, those who may have predeceased us, beings who will most certainly have been our relations in one way or the other through our infinitely long journey in samsara, those beings who may have been our mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, uncles, aunts, nephews, grandparents, so on and so forth, perhaps our friends, teachers, anyone who might have helped us, supported us, assisted us in any way, shape or form to better our lives, to have a comfortable livelihood in whatever shape or form they might have contributed towards that. It is now an opportunity for us to provide them with this gift of Dhamma. So let us take a moment to invite them. May they join us wherever they may be. If any of them have been born in the woeful plains, may this present to themselves an opportunity to acquire good merit in order that they may be able to redeem themselves from those woeful plains. May those beings who have been born in the blissful plains, as well as those who will today find the opportunity to be born in the blissful plains by rejoicing in this meritorious deed, may all those beings born in the blissful plains be able to listen to this Dhamma, reflect on it, contemplate, comprehend, and be able to redeem themselves from the shackles of samsara by attaining the supreme bliss of Nibbana. So now, as I make this invitation, I request you all to join me in your hearts and in your minds. Let us extend this invitation now to all those devas, brahmas, spirits, demons and the dead, wherever they may be. Let us open up this venue so that they may join us, and with all our heart invite them to join us to listen to this sermon, witness this meritorious deed, rejoice in those merits and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Samanta Chakravalesu Atra Gachantu Devata Sadhamman Munirajasansa Sunantu Sagga Mokkadang Dhamma Savana Kalo Ayang Bhadanta Dhamma Savana Kalo Ayang Bhadanta Dhamma Savana Kalo Ayang Bhadanta. Also, before we commence, let us take a moment to remind ourselves that in this infinitely long journey that we have come through in samsara, countless other times we may have been born, and countless other times we may have only had ignoble, immoral associations. And therefore countless other times those immoral, ignoble associations defiled our minds with raga, dvesha, moha, desire, aversion and delusion, blinded us with avidya and tanha, ignorance and attachment, and having done so, countless other times we may have offended, abused, slandered and desecrated the noble ones, the Aryas, as well as the Buddha's ministry, the Sambuddha Shasana. For any words, actions or thoughts of abuse, slander or desecration we might have directed towards them, either knowingly or unknowingly, such abuse, Aryupada, may today hinder and block our progress in the Dhamma. So, prior to us commencing, let us all take a moment to remind ourselves that this is most certainly the case in the lives of all of us in this infinite long journey in samsara. Let us be modest enough to accept that, and having accepted that, let us all take a moment to seek forgiveness from all those noble ones. May they have the kindness in their hearts to forgive us. And then finally, before we commence this sermon, let us all make a firm resolve that through the course of this very sermon, if there are any gaps in our understanding, in our knowledge, in our comprehension, which keep us from achieving those noble attainments of Sotapanna, Sakrudagami, Anagami and Arahat, may through the course of this sermon, such gaps be fulfilled. If there are any gaps in our understanding, in our knowledge, in our comprehension, may through the course of this sermon, such points of Dhamma be expressed, and may we all be able to attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. So with that firm resolve in mind, I invite you all to prepare yourselves to listen to this sermon. Okay. Rather peculiarly, I'm actually once again sat in front of a laptop without an audience. It brings back incredible memories, I must say, of those sermons that we used to do a long time ago. either in the monastery or perhaps when we were back in the UK, and I think it's a really stark reminder of how everything that we come across is cyclic. Everything goes round. What goes round comes around, as they say. So this is quite interesting, and it is also a good opportunity for myself, I must admit, to consider for myself where I am on my practice in the Dhamma. Not for any other reason, but perhaps there are, these are blessings and opportunities where for all of us we can test how much we may be attached to certain things. For instance, perhaps this is an opportunity for me to check for myself if I'm attached to having an audience in front of me before I am prepared to do a sermon. Because quite clearly that was not the case when I used to start these sermons. I really didn't have any audience apart from a machine that was staring back at me as I was doing at it. And we're back to where we started, and I'm really quite pleased that I feel just as relaxed and at peace and quite comfortable, actually, that I'm able to do this sermon just looking at a blank computer screen, which I'm sure is going to throw up a screensaver in a moment, and to continue this sermon. So this is a good opportunity for me to check myself, and I suppose it is also a good opportunity for you if, for instance, you have been accustomed to coming along to the monastery. I know there's a large population out there who join these sermons online, but there's also a good number that come along to the monastery and join these sermons. And of course the opportunity you get when you are at the monastery is that clearly when you listen to a sermon, your attention is absolutely fundamental to how well you absorb what you're listening to, because it's not just enough for your ears to pick up sounds or noise. No understanding of the Dhamma can be acquired by doing that. You have to listen, not just hear. I think in the past we've discussed the difference between the two. Your organs, that your ears can do all the hearing, but it's your mind that has to do the listening. And usually when there's lots of things going on in the background or in the foreground, it's difficult to pay attention, particularly if those events are not contributing to what it is you're trying to pay attention to. So when you're at the monastery, of course, you've got the Swami Nohanse sat in front with his winnowing fan in his left hand, and the sermon begins, and every word he says you are able to catch glance of, and that is how the sermon continues. But today it's a different scenario, and so it's a good opportunity for you also as well to, I suppose, check how much you are subject to interruptions. Because ultimately the purpose of us trying to walk this path, or actually walking this path, is to free ourselves of vexation. This is the core of what we discuss all the time. It's to free ourselves of the vexation that our minds experience constantly and incessantly. The vexation that we are able to experience when a sight catches our eyes, or a sound catches our ears, or a smell catches our nose, or a tongue, or a taste our tongue, and physical sensation our bodies. Because when these interrupts come from the outside world, so interrupt is a term that is used a lot in technology or in computing, and that being my background to some extent, and I think you will be familiar with that as well. So it's when an input or an interrupt comes from the outside world, and you have your sense organs prepared always to pick them up, and they do not discriminate. Your eyes never discriminate. Your ears don't discriminate. In other words, it doesn't pick good from bad, your eyes or ears, your nose, your tongue, because how do we know that? Well, if our sense organs did discriminate, then you'd really not have a problem. You would never see a sight that you didn't like to see, or you'd never hear anything that you didn't want to hear. You'd never taste anything that went foul. There wouldn't be any foul milk or food that's gone bad or a bad smell. None of that would really exist in this world, because they wouldn't come into your world if your sense organs discriminated. So we do know then that our sense organs don't discriminate. The culprit that does discriminate, or that is responsible for this discrimination, is really the mind. And this mind that is bereft with avidya and tanha, ignorance and attachment. Because we are attached to X, we reject Y. It's really as simple as that. The reason we reject certain things is because we are attached to others. So today that you have this opportunity where you do not have sights that are contributory to what's coming into your ears, because usually when you're sat down for a sermon, you see the Swamin Wahanse delivering the sermon, and the body language and everything matches up with what's coming in through your ears. But today you don't have that chance, and so what you're looking at right now at this very moment could be something very disconnected from what's coming in through your ears. And I can guarantee there'll be some among you who are playing games on your phones right now. Yes, I can read minds now. No, actually I can't. I just know how people behave and what habits people generally have, because I used to be like that. So there'll be others among you who are probably browsing YouTube, other channels on YouTube while you're listening to this. There'll probably be others who are just browsing on the internet, just seeing what's going on while your ears are doing the listening. But I would suggest and I would advise quite strongly that you refrain from doing that if at all possible, because that's not going to be very helpful. Your mind can never multitask, no matter what people say, because what we know is that a mind can only touch, a mind can only grasp one mind object, aramuna, one mind object at any given time. So if your eyes are looking at a particular side, then really your ears aren't listening to anything at that very moment. Thoughts arise and pass away, or chittas arise and pass away many hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands of times a second. This is why we don't see we can't distinguish between one chitta and the other, but this is the reality. Many hundreds of thousands of chittas arise and pass away at any given moment, or within the course of a second, and every chitta takes on a mental object, an aramana. Every chitta takes a mental object, but it can only take one mental object. It can only focus on one thing at any given time. So despite whatever people say, you should be good at multitasking, well, really the mind never multitasked. It just cannot do that, and it never will do that. So if what you're trying to do is to pay attention and trying to get the most of this sermon, then try and remove all those distractions and pay attention as best as you can, particularly because today you don't have the visual element. Okay, right. So we began with our talk about vexation, and if you've been listening to the sermons that we've been doing for some time now, over the last weeks, months, perhaps approaching a year, or perhaps longer, then you'll know that I think in perhaps a week or two ago I asked you all what does Nibbana mean to you, and you all had various responses to that. And as I think I put forward my very simplistic view of what Nibbana is, interpretation or definition of what Nibbana is, and to me it is where the mind is void of all vexation. Simple as that. We can describe Nibbana as being ragakke, dveshakke, mohakke. In other words, the extinguishing of raga, dvesha, moha, desire, aversion and delusion. In other words, it's where the mind, it's a state of mind where there is simply no vexation. And you know, when the Buddha, in the Buddha's time, and if you also have had any opportunity to study the texts, the Tripitaka, the three canons, which contains all the scriptures of the Buddha's teaching, if you haven't already, then I would urge you to do so, at least just to get an idea of what it is I mean when I say the Tripitaka. Contains of 57 books. That's 57 volumes, which is a lot of Dhamma. And I'm not suggesting you all go and read all of it, but it's good to know what scriptures we use as Buddhists in our study of Buddhist philosophy. There are lots of sermons, or rather lots of discourses, lots of sutras in these books. The Tripitaka is mainly contains three. It's made up of three sections: Vinaya, which is discipline, or the code of discipline, and which is mainly for Buddhist disciples or those who have gone forth, so bhikkhus and bhikkhunis. Then there is sutra, or discourses given to general audiences, and then there's Abhidhamma, which is the profound Dhamma, or the profound teaching of the Dhamma, which doesn't mean that it's the Abhidhamma you should all now go and start reading. That's absolutely not what I'm implying. But the Abhidhamma is like the laboratory of Buddhist philosophy. It's where you go to check if something doesn't look right, or it's where you go to calibrate your understanding. It's not bedtime reading for I really wouldn't say that it is, but I know there will be listeners among you who will take time to study the Abhidhamma Pitaka. I used to some time ago, but not so much. These days, most of my time I spend whenever I read the Tripitaka on the Sutra Pitaka, which contains the discourses. So anyway, these three collections are made up of 57 volumes, 57 books in total, and that's a lot of Dhamma. Now, the total number of discourses contained within these three sets, or these three collections, amounts to 84,000. That's 84 and 3 zeros. 84,000 discourses delivered to bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, upasakas and upasikas. So, when we look at this number 84,000, and we call this the Dhammaskandha, the aggregate, the totality, the total aggregate of the Buddha's dispensation. Why did the Buddha deliver so many discourses? One might begin to wonder. Because if you think about it, when the Buddha delivered his first sermon, Dhammsak Pavatum Sutra, or the turning of the wheel of Dhamma, his first sermon delivered under the Bodhi tree after he had attained, after he had visited the five ascetics in the deer forest, Jetavanarama, or rather the deer monastery, not Jetavanarama, the deer monastery. At that point in time, this is the Buddha's first sermon. This is the Isipatanarama, and he delivers his first sermon. And in his first sermon, think about this: a Buddha who has taken a long time in the making, many incalculable, or rather 4 incalculable eons, and 100,000 eons on top. 4 incalculable eons, which is an eon that cannot be counted in a number. You cannot give a number to how long an incalculable eon is. That's why it's called incalculable. 4 incalculable eons and then 100,000 eons on top of that. So that's how long a Buddha or a Bodhisattva fulfills his perfections, the paramitas, in his quest to become a supreme Buddha. So think about that. Having spent so much time in samsara, trying to achieve this supreme enlightenment, the pinnacle of all achievements, all success, all happiness, the supreme bliss. This is the pinnacle. You can't go any beyond this. In terms of understanding, in terms of knowledge, in terms of wisdom, there's no further step on this path. This is the ultimate. So having attained that after such a long time, he chooses to deliver this one sermon, which really, the reason that he chooses this sermon with no invitation, this is with no invitation. Remember, when he approached the ascetics, they weren't really prepared to listen to the Buddha. He in fact had to convince them that I have now attained Buddhahood. Because initially when he approached these 5 ascetics, all they were prepared to do was offer him a seat. And also, this is also because, in fact, the only reason they were prepared to do this was because he ascended from a royal, he had a royal descent. This is why they were prepared to do that. But other than that, all they saw was someone who had failed, on his quest, because, of course, the Buddha or the Bodhisattva abandoned the 5 ascetics. Perhaps it was the other way around. When the Bodhisattva decided this is not extreme self-mortification is not the path to liberation, and so, of course, the 5 ascetics abandoned him. And so when they met again during this re-encounter, the 5 ascetics were not prepared to accept the Buddha as a teacher of the philosophy or someone who had attained anything of anything substantial, and they weren't really prepared to listen to him. So they, and in fact, they had no understanding of the Buddhist philosophy. All they knew was the path to happiness is self-mortification. So during such a circumstance, or in these circumstances, you can imagine that the Buddha did not receive invitation, or he did not receive an invitation to deliver the wheel-turning discourse, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutra Deshana. He didn't receive an invitation to do this, that particular sermon anyway. So the Buddha chose himself that this is the sermon I'm going to deliver, because it's the ultimate truths that everyone needs to understand. These are the ultimate truths, because you have to have achieved ultimate happiness, ultimate bliss, ultimate perfection of knowledge and wisdom to be able to deliver a discourse of this nature. And having realized this for himself, he chooses to deliver this sermon. Now, that's not to say that other Buddhas have a different choice, because every Buddha or every Bodhisattva that attained Buddhahood, the first sermon that all Buddhas in the past and in the present have delivered and will deliver is always going to be the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutra Deshana. It's the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutra, or the wheel-turning discourse. That's always going to be the case, because it's within this discourse that he expounds the 4 noble truths. These 4 truths that cannot be discovered by anyone else. Not invented, discovered. And we've talked about the difference in the past, where you invent something that does not exist, but you discover something that has faded over time, that has disappeared over time, and it just needs discovery. So this is what the Buddha does. So he chooses to deliver this sermon, and in this sermon he summarizes the path to Nibbana. He summarizes the course, or he summarizes the 4 noble truths. He summarizes the crux of his teaching, and his entire philosophy he delivers within this discourse. So one might question then, quite reasonably, Why didn't the Buddha just deliver the same sermon every time he met somebody? Why did he choose to, having delivered the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutra discourse, why did he go on to do the Anattalakkana discourse? Why that? And then why did he go on to deliver Adityapariyaya discourse and various other discourses? Why 84,000? Why did he even bother with Abhidhamma? Questions that people might have. Of course, the Vinaya, the discipline, that can be easily considered to be something that would have been fundamental when you establish the Mahasangha. When you establish the Sangha, the Shasana, then you need a code of conduct for men and women who have ordained to behave in that. But then the Sutta collection and the Abhidhamma collection, why all this? A question one might have. And the reason for 84,000 different discourses, different teachings, which are really, although I say different, ultimately they all have the essence of Nibbana within them, so that is a similarity. But the difference here being the exact words are different. The similes and metaphors that he uses, examples that he uses, are different from to each other. The people that he speaks to, some of them are humans, others Brahmas, others Devas. So clearly there are differences in all this. Otherwise, you could have just had copy paste, and that would be the Tripitaka. Copy paste 84,000 times. Clearly that's not the case. Each discourse is different to the other. They're all unique. So why so many? Well, the reason for that is the Buddha realizes that people have different mindsets. When I say people, of course that might just imply humans, but sentient beings, Devas, Brahmas, spirits, demons, humans, all these sentient beings, they all have a different mindset. And it's a different mindset which is able to absorb the teaching. It's the same teaching, but in a different way to each other. Now, an example of this might be, for those of you who are currently in schooling, or perhaps who've been in schooling, or perhaps in some kind of training programs or whatever, you'll know that there are lots of different types of teaching. There's lots of different techniques involved in teaching. Some are more tactile, others use auditory learning, others more visual. And if you also think about it, the same subject is taught by different teachers. Now, if you take tuition, for instance, either in Sri Lanka, where it's quite popular, or perhaps in other countries, it's the same curriculum, but taught differently in different schools by different teachers as well as different tuition masters. You'd learn the same things. It's the same elements, it's the same content, but examples are different, the metaphors are different, and therefore the way that one is able to absorb this teaching is different. Because one might come from a farming background, right? So these are some of the reasons that why the Buddha had to deliver so many different discourses. Some of the people who approached him came from farming backgrounds. Others were Brahmins. Others were cleaners. Others were royals. And there were others who were workers or laborers. So people who came from lots of different backgrounds, and therefore what they were familiar with was different. Because of the variety in their background, or rather the variety of their upbringing, the variety of their livelihoods, they were fully accustomed with what their livelihood was. They were accustomed with their culture, they were accustomed with their lifestyle and the way of living. So what the Buddha did was, he delivered the Dhamma in a way whereby he used examples, similes, metaphors, which these listeners or these people who approached him were already familiar with. And therefore, if one might come along and he's, let's say, he's a royal, then the Buddha might use an example of how guarding the mind is like guarding the royal palace, for instance, or perhaps the village for which, or the village or the town or the country for which that person was held responsibility. And he used examples which people that came to him were familiar with. And what he did was he related the Dhamma in a way that the people who came to him were able to understand by doing this. So he was very intelligent, he was very wise, and he was very witty in delivering sermons in such a way. Now, also it meant, what this also meant was that 84,000 is coincidentally also the number of different types of mindsets that people have. Now, this is not something that you and I are able to count and gauge. You know, we're not going to be able to count here. Here's one mindset, here's a second, here's a third, and so on and so forth. But it's something that makes absolute sense. So the Buddha in his sermons, in his 84,000 preachings that he gives, they're all directed towards a particular kind of mindset. So for instance, when a Brahmin approaches him, and the Buddha, being able to scan this person's intellect, this is a power that the Buddha possesses and no one else does. Indriya paro pariyata jnane. So the Buddha is able to look into this person's faculties, not the eye, ear, nose faculty, but Shraddha, Virya, Sati, Samadhi, Prajna, these faculties. So he's able to scan this person's faculties, and he's able to gauge what is this person's intellect, what is his capacity, his or her capability, and then deliver a sermon that meets exactly that person's requirement. Okay, so the Buddha is now able to introspect, or rather extrospect, these people's mindsets and gauge the type of sermon that's required, the Dhamma contents that's required for this person to understand the teaching. So therefore we are able to come to a reasonable assessment that there were 84,000 different types of mindsets out there. Now, that's really a lot of background information there, but there's a reason why I bring this point up. And the reason I bring this point up is, when we walk the path of Dhamma, you start listening to sermons, you start listening to lots of sermons, and you listen to even more sermons sometimes from the same people, sometimes it's from different people, sometimes it's from lay people, other times it's from monks. It doesn't matter. But when you start listening to sermons, and when you start to observe and study and analyze the Dhamma, there's going to be a point in your lives, and for some of you, you might have already come across this point. There's going to be a point whereby the Dhamma is just going to click. It's going to make sense. You're going to hear a teaching, you're going to understand it, it's going to make perfect sense, and through conviction. What I mean by that is, no matter who comes and rejects your belief, no matter who comes and challenges your belief, because you have come to it through conviction, through pure understanding. You are steadfast in your understanding. That cannot be shaken. Your faith, your conviction cannot be shaken. So that's going to happen at some point. When that happens, it's at that point you need to be clever enough to know that whatever sermon that you listen to, whatever discourse that you were listening to, whatever doctrine or part of the doctrine that you were listening to, well, of course, it was all delivered initially by the Buddha. This is the source of the Dhamma. The Buddha Dhamma does not come from anywhere else. It has to come from the Buddha. So no matter who you've been listening to, that is the discourse, that is the teaching, that is the sutra that the Buddha expounded to match your intellect. That is the discourse, that is the doctrine, that is the teaching that the Buddha delivered to match your capability, your capacity, your personality, your background, the discourse that's going to help you get through samsara or get across samsara. It's really important that you realize this, because a lot of people sometimes come really close. They come across a teaching that makes sense, that they understand, but sometimes perhaps not convinced yet. As in, perhaps not having attained sotapanna yet, so not the phala but the marga, so the path but not the fruit. There may be a time where they have come so close to the path but not quite cut it yet. When they reach this point, the Dhamma is going to become really clear. What they're listening to is going to make a lot of sense. Of course, there may be bits and pieces that one might be unsure of, but the core teaching is going to be very clear, and it's going to make a great deal of sense. And you're going to be able to see how, when one follows that teaching, they're able to attain Nibbana. So, my advice is, if you have come across that point in your life where a particular teaching, not necessarily a teacher, but a particular teaching, the doctrine, you've come across, or it could be a sutra, it could be a particular discourse that you've listened to, when you have gone through that learning experience, if you're able to see with conviction that this is going to lead me to Nibbana, I would suggest that at that point you stop searching for more Dhamma. You stop searching for a path to Nibbana, because, well, you've just found your path to Nibbana. If the Buddha delivered 84,000 suttas and they were all directed towards 84,000 mindsets, well, you've just hit potluck. You've just come across that discourse, that teaching, that doctrine, that presentation of the philosophy which made sense to you and through which you are able to see the path, the liberation, in fact the Four Noble Truths. It's all going to make sense at that point. And when that happens, it's time to stop searching for another path. It's time to stop searching for more Dhamma or for more paths that get you to where you want to be, which is Nibbana. It's akin to, if I were to offer a simile, imagine we're all trying to bathe in a river, and to get into this river there are 84,000 well, let's say a handful, okay, a handful of entry points into this river, then once you've come across one and you can see that this, it could be a staircase, or it could be some steps even. If you can see that this path is going to get you into the water, then I suggest you stop looking for another path. Because you're going to ask yourself, what am I here to do? Am I here to uncover all the paths there is to get to the river, or am I here to bathe in the river? Which of these two am I here to achieve? If it is that you're here to find all the paths that one could take to get into the water, then of course keep looking, keep searching, and you may find other paths. Some may look like the real thing, but they can be elusive. You might get lost. But if the purpose of you being here is not to find lots of paths to get into the water, if that's not what you're looking, and your purpose is really simply to bathe because you want to wash all the dirt on your body, you want to cleanse yourself, if that is your purpose, then I suggest as soon as you found one path into the water, you stop looking for another. If you don't, here's what can happen. And the reason I bring this point up in this sermon particularly is because I'm beginning to see and witness, and through sometimes experiences that our listeners come and share with us, that a lot of people, although they have come so close to the path, and it's looking like this may be a potential path, although they have come so close to a path, because there's this mental vexation. Remember, the mind is always wanting to know, wanting to take in sensations and wanting to know about them. Sensation and recognition or identification. The mind is always wanting to do this, Vedana and Sanya. So the mind is always curious. The mind is always so inquisitive. Because the mind is so inquisitive, because the mind is so curious, even after it has come across one path which is clearly going to take them into the water, but still it's not 100%, because otherwise then you will have become a Sotapanna. I'm talking about someone who's so close to the path, so close, it's looking like this is a potential path, but what they choose to do at that point is not proceed on that potential path. They just try to, they make they perhaps mark, they put a marker, a landmark, where they've just discovered this potential path, and what they do is they go looking for another. And the reason that you go looking for another is because you have forgotten your purpose. Because if your purpose is to bathe, then for all the time you're going to be spending looking for other paths, and if while you're trying to bathe is because you've got dirt all over your body and it stinks, well, for all the time you're going to spend looking for other paths, well, you're just going to continue to be dirty. You're going to continue to stink. Have you forgotten that? Have you forgotten that? What is this dirt I'm speaking of here? Desire, aversion and delusion, raga, dvesha, moha. Ignorance and attachment, avidya and tanha. It's because of these defilements, these cankers, that we keep suffering in samsara, with every chitta that arises and passes away, we are in a state of suffering. It's because of this. It's because of raga, dvesha, moha. Now if eradication of raga, dvesha, moha can only be achieved by bathing in the water of Dhamma, or the river of Dhamma, then you have to get into the water. Having found a potential path, has not done anything to rid yourself of suffering, because you've only just found a potential path, and that path hasn't become clear just yet. You haven't accepted it through conviction, because it can't be a potential path where you're seeing wild bushes all over the place. It just looks like a potential path, and you're thinking, just maybe this might lead me to where I want to go. But you haven't bothered to start walking the path yet. You haven't bothered to enter the path yet. So if you haven't entered the path yet, but by looking at the, there's all the indications that this may be a potential path, because you have listened to a Kalyana Mitra, a Satpurusha, who says, this is what a path might look like. It has to be in this direction compared to the river. So, having paid attention to what this Kalyana Mitra is saying, you are making an educated guess that this may be a path, a potential path, but hey, you haven't started walking the path yet, and you're not in the water yet, and therefore all that dirt is still all over you. And guess what? You still stink. So, even after you've come across that potential path, if you keep looking for more paths to get into the water, then what's going to happen is you may get lost. And let's say you go looking for another path. The first path looked potentially obvious, or rather looked like a potential positive, but you go looking for another path, and you do find another potential path, but you start walking down that path, and halfway down you realize this is just a dead end. This is not going to get me to where I want to go. I'm just going to get lost. And sometimes you might have to then trace your steps back all the way. So if you've gone down a long way down that rabbit hole, then you're going to have to come a long way back. And here's the even worse danger. Here's what's even more dangerous. You might then also trace your steps back to the original, the place where you came across the original potential path. And, well, now you're back. A lot of wild bushes have grown. There's a lot of overgrowth, and that is the same spot you've come back to. But because of all these bushes, because of all the overgrowth, the path is no longer clear. What looked clear last time round you were there is no longer clear. So what you've just done is you've just sacrificed a potential path, and you've now just lost everything and gained nothing. This is so applicable in trying to get to Nibbana. This simile is so applicable, because what a lot of people do is when they have seen a potential path, in other words, it sounds like this is the path to Nibbana. You're seeing all the right evidence, having listened to noble ones, Aryas, and they're explaining that these are the signs of the path, and you can see from the people that give these sermons, from people who talk about the path, that it looks like they have actually traveled down the path, because they have eradicated raga, dvesha, moha, at least to some extent. When that's becoming obvious, then I think it's safe to say, stop looking for another path, because you just might have come across the discourse that the Buddha gave for people of your mindset. So if that discourse, if that doctrine is number 36,524, remember there's 84,000. So if you just come across 36,524, that's just a random number, by the way, then that was the doctrine that the Buddha delivered for you, for your mindset. 36,524. 36,525 is not going to do it for you, is not going to cut it for you. So do you not realize that you just wasted your time looking for another path then? Until it becomes clear, of course, keep looking. There's no qualms about that. I have no qualms about that, and I would even encourage you to do that. But once you have come across the right path, what at least looks like the right path, I say take the courage, pick up your guts and enter the path. Once you've entered the path, then it's going to look so clear, because initially you perhaps couldn't see the wood for the trees, but once you've entered the path, you're going to start seeing footsteps of people who went down that path, and there are not going to be any footsteps in the opposite direction, because it's a one-way street, it's a one-way road. Once you start going down that path, and what do I mean by the path? The Noble Eightfold Path. Once you started going down that path, no one ever comes back from that path. It's one way, because it only leads you to the river. But the danger with going looking for other paths is they may look like the real thing. I'm talking about once you've already found a potential one, okay? If you go looking for another, they may look like the real thing, but you might get lost. Also look for footsteps in the opposite direction, because that's a telltale sign. People before you have tried going down that path, but they've also treaded their steps back. What do I mean by that? How do we relate that to the Dhamma? People who sometimes in some sermons you might hear people talk about their beliefs or what they believe is the true doctrine, but sometime down the line they say, well, you know, that what we spoke about earlier on, that's not really the true Buddhist philosophy, it's something else, so it's time we change that. Or they might say, the way they conduct themselves might change. For instance, they may look very docile, they may look very calm and collected, or they might even conduct themselves likewise. And this could be both lay and clergy. And I would suggest you do that evaluation with myself to begin with, as in with me. If you listen to these sermons, then you have every right to observe and come to your own conclusions. But just make sure you don't jump to conclusions at any point, because you might be making the wrong conclusion. But be observant all the time, and when you're observant, you will pay attention, and then you can check for yourself. This monk who's talking about Nibbana, how does he conduct himself? Is his conduct congruent? Is it compatible with what he preaches? Because you have to be yatavadi tathakari. Tathakari yatavadi. This is the Buddha's teaching. You have to do as you say, and you have to say what you do. So you can't cover up. You can't do something different to what it is you preach. In other words, practice what you preach. So be observant, and in summary, what I would say is, with regards to that point, make sure that when you have come across a potential path, I only use the word potential until you have entered the path, and once you've entered the path and you have achieved the state of Sotapanna, now you don't need to take it by faith, because it becomes conviction. It's no longer an educated guess. You will know it like the back of your palm. It will become crystal clear. So until you have attained the stage of Sotapanna, in other words, until you can see that a particular path has the Four Noble Truths clearly within the doctrine, and you are able to see yourself walking that path and ultimately leading to Ragake, Dveshake, Mohake, or the cessation of all mental vexations. Until you are able to make that judgment for yourself, there's nothing wrong in keeping looking, in keeping an eye out for other potential paths. But what I would suggest is, once you've found a potential path, if it looks like the real thing, then walk down that path first. Try it out before you keep a landmark and go and try out other paths, because otherwise you're just wasting your time most of the time. Okay, so that's some general advice to a lot of our listeners who come and speak to us also after sermons, and sometimes visit us at the monastery, and sometimes even drop messages through our social media channels. They question, how do I know when I've come to the right place? When do I have to keep looking? Do I have to continue to keep looking? The thing is, our lives are so short. We don't know when our clocks are gonna do its last tick. So when it becomes at least semi-obvious that a path has been discovered, then we shouldn't waste any more time, because time is not really on our side. That's the problem. We don't know when. It's not really a matter of if, as we know by now. It's a matter of when. So we can't really roll the dice when it comes to what am I going to do with my time. It has to be every single time, something that leads you to Nibbana. So, in fact, going back to, I think, what I asked you to do last week, or rather something we discussed last week, where a lot of people say, we don't have the time to attain Nibbana, life is just too busy, I can only do it if I come to the monastery, I can only do it if I ordain one day. If you remember, the suggestion I gave you, the advice I gave you last week was, the cause of all suffering is attachment. It would be great if you could come to the monastery leaving your attachment at home. Then by all means come to the monastery. It would be great if you could come and ordain, but leave attachment at home. So the moment you renunciate, the moment you leave home, you put that last step out the door. If you are able to leave ignorance and attachment at home, then by all means come and ordain. By all means come and become a monk or a nun, and by all means come to the monastery and look for residence. But there are others among you who really don't always have that opportunity, and this is why I say Nibbana is not in the robe. It's not at the monastery. We don't sell Nibbana at the monastery, because it's not something that can be sold. You can't write a check out to me and I can't give you Nibbana as such. It is an understanding, it's a comprehension. And that comprehension has to come from within. Within the mind it has to arise. I can't do it for you. It has to happen for each of you individually. It has to happen for each and every one of you, for yourselves. So if it's a wholly mental transformation, then what is the haste in trying to make a physical transformation beforehand? It's the mental transformation that is important here. It's not the physical transformation. So that mental transformation, let that precede the physical transformation. When you have duties and responsibilities that have to be attended to, let it be. just do them, just attend to them. I wouldn't say take upon yourself new responsibilities and duties. If you have the freedom, then by all means grab it by its horns. Chances are you're not going to get that opportunity again in your life, not for a very long time at least. But if you do have such duties and responsibilities, it could be to your friends, to your family, your elderly parents, or your grandparents, or it could be to your children. If that is the case, then it's what is really, really, really important to understand is Nibbana is a mental transformation. When you come to the monastery, when you ordain, no mental transformation happens at the flick of your fingers. That doesn't happen. If that were the case, then I'd be an arahant by now. And I'm clearly not. So that transformation happens, we don't know when, but it will absolutely happen for one who's in the Dhamma. But that transformation can happen anywhere for as long as you have your mind. And what is the only place you have your mind? Is that when you come to the temple? Is that when you go to work? Is that only when you're at school? No, of course not. You have your mind 24/7, 365 days a year. For every moment you're alive and breathing. Let's discard the time that you're asleep. For every other, not that the mind's not there at that time, but at least you can't make any conscious decisions at that time. So for every moment you're alive and kicking, for every moment you're awake, you have a working conscience through which you can go through that mental transformation. What's important is you find that time to do that within your own circumstances, the situations that you find yourself in. All objects, events and people, as we know by now, are vexatious, which means subject to vexation, have the capability to vex you. That's what vexatious means. It's the adjective of vexation. It has the capability to vex you, or the potential to vex you, but there is a requirement that has to come from your side, and that is attachment. Only if you are attached can worldly things and people and objects and events vex you. If you have zero attachment, if you have zero ignorance, then nothing in this world can vex you. It's like if you were to ask, can water drown you? What might you answer to that? What might be your response? Can water drown you? Is water drownable? I don't know if that's even a word. Can water be drowned in? Well, it depends who you ask. If you ask an ant, then the ant's gonna go, well, absolutely. If you ask a toddler, then the toddler's gonna go, absolutely. But what if you ask a fish? How can you drown a fish in water? You can't drown a fish in water. That's its natural habitat. You can't drown a fish in water. So what does a fish have that an ant doesn't? Or what does an ant have that a fish doesn't? A fish has gills. In other words, an ant doesn't have gills. And when an ant doesn't have gills which allow one to breathe in water without any other apparatus, then once you're thrown into the water, well, you're going to suffocate. You're going to drown and die. But fish have gills. So therefore, to them, if you ask a fish the question, does water drown? Is water drownable? Then a fish is going to go, no, it's not. There's nothing wrong with water. Water is just, it's pretty safe. But if you ask an ant the same question, if you ask a toddler, if you ask someone who doesn't who cannot swim, then they're going to say, well, absolutely, and therefore they have to be careful. So similarly, for all of us who have ignorance and attachment in our minds, all worldly objects, people and events are vexatious. In other words, they have the capability to vex us just as much as the water has the capability to drown you, but you either have to have no gills or you should be unable to swim. Provided that you have these characteristics, then water can drown you, or you can drown in water. And likewise, provided you have the characteristics of avidya and tanha, ignorance and attachment, then you will vex. You will be subject to vexation. And therefore, all worldly objects are vexatious. But remove ignorance and attachment from the mindset of a person, then the world is no longer vexatious. The world can no longer vex you, would be the better way to put it. So this is what we are trying to do, to remove ignorance and attachment from our minds. Now, as I say, to me Nibbana is a state of mind where there is zero vexation. How do we know when we are vexed? How do we know there is vexation right now in our minds? Well, what if you went blind at the count of 3? I go 3, or 1, 2, 3. At the count of 3, what if you went blind? You haven't shut your eyelids, you have your eyes fully open, but you've just gone blind. Everything's just dark, pitch black. How would you feel then? Would you start to cry? Would you start to get all agitated? Would you start to go into a state of mental turmoil? Would you start calling for your mother? Would you start to run crazy around the house? Then, well, clearly you've gone, you're in a state of vexation. You are vexed. These are symptoms of vexation. And the reason for this is because you still are wanting to know, wanting to sense and wanting to know what's going on in the outside world. And as we've discussed in the past, we have these 6 organs: the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and the mind. It's the mind that begins this whole malarkey, if you like. Because the Dhamma has to come from somewhere. This is a mental object that has to come from somewhere. Someone says, chocolate cake. Now, that thought comes into mind. Imagining you've never seen chocolate cake in your lives before. These words, just hearing the words, it's like, for instance, say you've gone to the zoo. Now, the reason you go to the zoo is you like to watch animals. So, as you enter the zoo, you have already decided that animals in the zoo are worth looking at. And isn't that why you've gone into the zoo? You've even bought yourself a ticket. You have decided that animals in the zoo are worth looking at, and you're even willing to pay for it. You're even willing to pay for it. This is why you've gone into the zoo, right? You walked into the zoo. So, when you walked into the zoo, and let's say you're walking down one of the roads or the aisles, if you like, and you stop in front of a cage in which there are some animals you've never seen before. Remember, you walked into the zoo thinking that these animals are worth looking at, they're worth observing, and actually, given the opportunity, you would even touch them. You can't tell me you've never been to a zoo and wondered, can I touch them? Can I touch these animals? And some zoos even allow you to do that, don't they? And even sometimes farms, you can go and you can pet farm animals. So likewise, in some zoos, you're allowed to pet animals, pet them on the head, or pat them even if you like, right? So when you walk into the zoo, already having decided based on someone's instruction that going to the zoo is worthwhile, this is how, otherwise, did any one of us come into this world wanting to go to a zoo? No, because we all just came from one, right? So none of us came into this world wanting to go back into one, but through our associations, our friends, our family, our grandparents, whoever, they said, Putta, you should go and let's go to the zoo. A friend says, hey dude, let's go to the zoo. And you ask, what's a zoo? Oh, that's where they cage these animals. And it's really interesting. You should go to the zoo. There are lots of different types of animals, and it's a really nice thing to do in your leisure time. So now, even before you go walk into the zoo, you're vexing. Because, well, you've never been into the zoo before, but in your mind, someone's already planted this seed that animals in the zoo are worth looking at. A visit to the zoo is absolutely worth it. By the way, I'm not selling a trip to the zoo here, okay? I'm just saying this is how people sell this idea to us. You have to go to the zoo before you die. And if you go on things like TripAdvisor, if you use those websites, and you go somewhere and you want to while away some hours while you're there, generally the national zoo in whatever country or that you visit will generally feature in the top 10 or so points of interest. And so generally that's somewhere you find yourself going. So when you read those reviews on TripAdvisor, they'll say, oh, this is a really good zoo, you have to go watch this, you have to go watch these animals, you have to go look at these animals perform all these miraculous tricks, and it's such a fun place to go. It's well worth a visit for young families, and couples can go there, and children have to be taken there, and all sorts. And all sorts. So you take their instruction and you go to the zoo. Excuse me. So when you walk into the zoo, you've already made your mind up, these animals are worth looking at, right? So when you walk into the zoo, then you're walking in front of a cage in which there's some animals. You've never seen them before. You know what question comes to mind next. This is no secret because we've all been there, haven't we? What question comes to mind when you see an animal? In your mind you're thinking, yes, going to the zoo is so interesting. I'm really curious what animals are there. What do those animals look like? Are they beautiful? Are they spectacular? So, excuse me. When you walked into the zoo and you've seen some animals caged, you've never seen them before, what question comes to mind? Well, as I have said in the past, the answer is in the question. What question comes to mind? The answer is in the question. What's the answer? Well, the answer is, what is that animal? What is it? What is that animal? So you see, you're vexing. This is wanting to know. Curiosity killed the cat, remember? Well, guess what's killing you then? Curiosity killed the cat and is doing the same to us all over again. In our curiosity, in our inquisitiveness, wanting to know what's going on in the outside world, because, remember, we are bereft with ignorance. And what does ignorance always tell us? That pleasure exists in the outside world. Pleasure exists in the sights, sounds, smells, tastes and touch that we come across. So, if pleasure exists as we are, in accordance to our, 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 in accordance our perspective, we have just taken on board this belief that pleasure does exist in sight, sound, smell, taste and touch. And if that is the case, then surely pleasure has to exist in the sight that I've just seen when I'm at the zoo. So I'm looking at an animal, I've never seen it before, and I want to know what it's called. That could be one scenario. Or the other is, sometimes, and this has happened to me quite often, when I was just reminding myself of maybe just a few years ago, I used to like going into zoos, and sometimes, you know how you walk into where they have caged their reptiles, and the nature of these reptiles, like snakes and serpents, is they go and hide themselves, sometimes in the foliage or sometimes in bits of trunk of trees. They go and hide themselves, so they're not easy to spot. Right? I'm sure you'll have come across such instances. Sometimes small reptiles, they go and hide themselves, and you have to then look around the cage trying to find them. Where might they be? Right? So you're looking at the label, the nameplate on fixed to the cage, and it's got a name of this animal, and sometimes it might even have a picture of it. Now you want to know, where is it? Or if it has a name only, you've now been able to give it a sanya, which is an ID. It's like giving it an ID card. You've just given this animal an ID card, but that's just a dhamma that's gone into the mind. Because now you know what it's called. You know what it's called. Let's say it's a king cobra. You know it's called a king cobra, but you've not seen one before in your life, so you want to know what it looks like. Therefore, you look around, you keep staring, scanning this cage, trying to find that king cobra. You know it's called what it's called. You know what it's called, but that's not enough. Because the moment you got to know what it's called, now all your five senses, eyes, ears, nose, and tongue and body, are now vexing to find out what might this animal look like, smell like, hopefully not taste like. You're probably going to get kicked out if you try and lick a king cobra in the zoo. And I would warn against doing that, because before you get kicked out, they're probably going to have to bring an ambulance. But you're going to at least want to know what it looks like. Maybe you want to know what it smells like. And also, if you are lucky, maybe you want to know what it feels like. This is why sometimes people go to snake dancers. Have you ever been to a snake dancer where they blow this musical instrument like a flute, and the snake dances? And sometimes what these snake dancers allow us to do is, when you pay them a small fee, they have a snake. Sometimes sometimes it's even as big as a python, and they put it around your neck just for entertainment. So again, you've seen what it looks like, but that wasn't enough. So what did you ask for? I'll pay you money if only you let it put me around my neck. And sometimes when it goes around the neck, you find that so disgusting. You feel the animal and you feel quite queasy about it as well. So you see, ultimately it wasn't the sparsha rupa, it wasn't the pottabha rupa, it wasn't the sensation, the physical sensation that you felt that brought you that pleasure, but it was simply wanting to know what it was like. Ever ridden a horse or a pony? I've had that experience where I saw someone ride a horse one time, and I thought, that must be fun. So what did I do? I went up to this man who had his horses, and then I paid her. I think I asked my parents to pay him some money so I could ride the horse. But as soon as I got on top of the animal, I realized that was not fun. That was so painful. I think it carried me around for less than a minute, by which time I decided this was not my cup of tea. I really wanted to get off the animal. But I was relieved of my vexation. Although I had a really sore bottom after the end of that experience. So how can a really sore bottom relieve me from vexation? Yes, a really interesting question for us all to think about, is it not? Here's a sore bottom and relief from vexation. How can the two of them even be uttered in the same sentence? A sore bottom and relief from vexation? That just cannot happen. So what really happened though was I wanted to know what it felt like. Therefore we paid to ride the horse. I got on top of the animal, and as soon as I was on top of the animal, and now I can sense all these vibrations as the animal's hopping along. I can feel those sensations going through my body, and it's really hurting my backside. So now I can feel those sensations, and they're bringing me torture. I did not enjoy that experience one bit, but I was relieved of my vexation. The vexation of wanting to know what that was going to feel like. This wanting to know, curiosity, again, curiosity killed the cat. Google it if you've not come across that expression before. Curiosity killed the cat, right? And curiosity killed my backside that day. It really wasn't fun. I didn't enjoy that, but I was relieved of vexation, and that moment where I got to know what it felt like, that brought me sense of pleasure. But I suffered for a long time after that experience. But that moment where I got to know what it felt like, that wasn't a long moment. That was a very brief moment, perhaps 1 or 2 seconds, where I got to know what it felt like to sit on the animal. That was what I paid for. But I wasn't warned of the consequences that would come after that. I didn't know that you had to get used to it, and everyone goes through that experience the first time they do it. But I wasn't prepared to go take another shot at it. But I was relieved of my vexation. So clearly the reason I wasn't prepared to take another shot at it was because I was relieved of my vexation of wanting to know what it felt like. So I didn't want to go and do it a second time, because I did not have that vexation a second time. Why? Because vexation is the process of an outcome, or the outcome of a process, even as we have discussed in the past. For me to have vexed what it was going to feel like, well, clearly I need to have mentally attached to wanting to know what it was going to feel like. I was so attached to it. I really, really, really wanted to know. And why was I attached to it? Because as we approached those stables, you could see boards all over the place. Come along and get a ride, and you could see a long queue of people standing to get a ride, and then you're thinking, well, if others want to have a shot at this, then surely it must be enjoyable. But what the really annoying thing is, no one that got on the horse for the first time and had the same experience as I did got off the horse and complained about it. Everyone kept so quiet about their sore backsides. But I could guarantee that everyone walked home with a sore backside, but no one complained, no one made any mention of it, and therefore you could just see people joining the queue, one after the other, and me, like an idiot, joined the same queue. So that's what I learned anyway. But today I'm able to reflect on that. Today I'm able to reflect on it and realize that I did enjoy pleasure, but that pleasure was absolutely not in being able to ride the horse. It was not in that. It was in being able to relieve myself of the wanting to know what's going on. And then going back to the king cobra in the cage, or in the tank even, when you're there and you've seen this, if you've never seen a cobra in your life before, you're seeing this name board where it says king cobra inside, do not touch. Sometimes it comes with a warning. I think that's the other interesting thing. What do most people like to touch? Is it things that people are warned it's okay to touch, or things that people are warned do not touch? Usually people want to touch something that says that has a warning, says do not touch. Again, why is that the case? You know, when someone, think about it, right? When do people oftentimes, when touch a bench, a freshly painted bench, when do most people touch it? Or a piece of furniture that's just been painted, or maybe it's a door or a window pane. When do people mostly touch it? Yeah, you know it. When there's a sign next to it that says what? It says wet paint, do not touch. What do people do? Touch it. It's incredible, isn't it, how people's minds work? And the reason for that is, again, when there's a warning, you know, this is wet paint, so do not touch. Now people are curious. The human mind is curious now, because the mind wants to know, is it really still wet? Perhaps it's dry now. Let me find out. As soon as that question comes to mind, as soon as that wanting to know comes to mind, now the mind goes into vexation again. So when the mind's gone into vexation, what is the best way to relieve oneself of that vexation? Well, here's a mind that is ignorant. So what is an ignorant mind? What is the nature of an ignorant mind? The nature of an ignorant mind is pleasure comes from the outside world. If pleasure comes from the outside world, and the outside world can only come into my inside world through my eyes, ears, nose, tongue and body, when it says wet paint, then usually people like to sniff it, don't they? I'm sure some of you will have done it too. There's wet paint, and what you do, you bring your nose to it and try to sniff it. Well, you leave with a spot of paint on the tip of your nose when you just go too close to it. This is what happens. This is what happens when you don't listen, or when you don't read the instruction, when you're not prepared to accept the warning. Why? Because you are succumbed. You surrender to your mental desires. This is what happens. This is why we say you are a slave to your mind. Because now when the mind reads that sign, when your eyes read that sign, wet paint, do not touch, that transfers that signal to the mind, and now the mind's reading that and going, okay, wet paint, do not touch. But how do I know it's really wet paint? I think I ought to know that. Now the mind's in a state of vexation. Is it really wet? Although they say it is. Perhaps they put that sign up a good few hours ago, so surely it should be wet. It should be dry by now. So it really couldn't harm for me to touch it and see if it's still wet. It must be wet by now. Besides, look at it. Yeah, it looks a bit shiny, but looking at it from the side, it doesn't look that wet. Let me bring my nose closer to the paint and see if it's wet. If the paint still smells fresh, then perhaps it's not dry yet. So you move your nose within an inch of the furniture, and you're thinking, that I'm still not sure. So now it's half an inch, I'm still not sure. Quarter of an inch, still not sure. And then what happens next? Well, what happens at the worst of times is you have a mate or a friend who thinks they're a smartass. What do? They stand behind you and they push you forward. They give a tap on your head, and what happens then is you bang your nose on the furniture or on the door or that bench or whatever, and now there's paint all over your face. Have you just not been relieved of your vexation? But what was the price you had to pay for that? A face full of paint. You might as well have gone face painting. You've now got yourself a face of wet paint, but hey, presto, you've just been relieved of your vexation. Now you know that the paint is still wet. How sad. Seriously, how pathetic is that? Think about it. having confirmed that the paint is still wet, what have you gained from that? Is there anything substantial that you've gained from knowing, from confirming that the paint is wet? Has it given you food to eat? Are you any wiser? Are you any more intelligent? Have you gained any more wisdom? Are your faculties more powerful than they were before you smelled the paint? Or perhaps before you smelled the paint you had a headache and now the headache's gone. Is that the case? No. So you are in no better a state than before you smelled the paint. As a matter of fact, you are in a worse state, because now you got to go looking for a bottle of thinner so you can get the paint off your face. See where curiosity gets us? Where this attachment to worldly objects, in the ignorance, this delusion that pleasure exists in the outside world, as soon as that idea settles in our mind, ladies and gentlemen and children, what happens is we fall into that trap of, surely if there's pleasure in the outside world, then there's only one thing I need to do. I need to open my eyes, open my ears, open my nose, open my tongue, put out my hand, so I can bring these outside worldly sensations inside my mind, and along with the arising of Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana, I am now able to sense what's going on in the outside world. Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana never brought any pleasure with them. I think over many weeks now we've been talking about the beetle leaf example, and it should become obvious to you by now. So they never brought any pleasure along with them. But what happened was, that was the very thing you were attached to. You wanted to know if the paint was wet. That was all you were after. Is it still wet? That's all you wanted to know. Finding that out was not going to cure anything else. It didn't put food on a plate. Didn't put any more money in your bank account. Didn't make you friends with anybody. Didn't win friends. Well, probably only lost you a friend, the guy who was a smartass and hit your head, so you banged on the paint or the bench or whatever. But all that has its roots in this curiosity, in wanting to know, that inquisitiveness, which is ultimately this mental vexation. But that mental vexation is rooted in attachment. Attachment, this desire of wanting to know. Every single time, whenever you have sense pleasure, that is always the case. You know, sometimes when, and I'm sure some of you will have such experiences, right? And you should pardon me for using such an example, but I'm sure this is something that you have all come across in life, and therefore it's worth thinking about, because I think this really conveys the point that it's not what it smells like that matters really. It's just wanting to know what it smells like. It really doesn't matter what it smells like. It's when when someone sends out gas. I don't want to use the rude word for it, but when someone passes air from their bottoms, you know what I mean, because as human beings we've all experienced that. Okay, when that happens, and if you ever hear someone do that, if you hear that noise coming from somebody, then can you guarantee that every single time you've heard someone do that, you've run 1,000,000 miles away? Or have you very subtly, very slyly actually sniffed just a little bit, just to know what it smelled like? I know. It's disgusting that, no, it's not the example that's disgusting. It's the fact that you have been able to bring yourself to do it. That's what's disgusting. Wanting to know what it's like. You've just heard someone send out air, send out gas, and you want to know what it smells like. Surely, you've done that enough times by now to know that that doesn't smell of rose. It doesn't smell of incense sticks. It doesn't smell of jasmine. We've all lived long enough to know that by now. But nevertheless, when you hear that, when you know it's going on, this is happening in the outside world, right? The dhammas come into your mind. Oh, someone's just passed gas. Your ears have just picked up that, so now no longer there's no vexation in your ears, or coming through your ears, or rather in your mind because of your ears, or you're right trying to relieve through your ears. But you do know that this event can be experienced by three different ways. One is Dhamma coming to the mind. Two, it's sound coming to the ears. And what's the third one? Well, you know it. It's smell coming to the nose. So when the mind has just been presented with another interrupt, another input, another way to get to know the outside world, it really doesn't matter what it smells like. It really doesn't. Because, let's be honest, you know what it's going to smell like. It's probably going to smell of rotten eggs or something like that. Half the time it's going to be hydrogen sulfide. Rotten eggs, the smell of rotten eggs. But you don't care what it smells like. You just want to know what. You just want to know. You just want to get the smell. You just want to sense it. That's what you want to know. Because your mind is vexing. If you had the choice of asking your nose, hey Mr. Nose, imagine your ears are talking to your nose. Your ears are just reporting to your nose and going, hey buddy, I've just heard someone pass gas. Right? I heard the sound. What would you like to do next? Imagine your ears asking your nose that question. What do you think your nose is going to say? Your nose is probably going to say, let's get the hell out of here. That's probably what your nose is going to say. But oh no. Unfortunately, your nose is connected to your mind as much as your ears are. So it was your mind that picked up that your ears, it was your mind that recognized that your ears picked up that noise. And now your mind wants to know, well, what other ways can I know about, can I get more information about what just happened? My ears just said, I heard the noise. It was gas being passed out. But hey, I can know it in 3 different ways. I only got the 2. Where's the third? Come on, nose, give it to me. And so what happens? The nose gets activated and come on, sniff it, old buddy, sniff it. This is what the mind's saying to your nose. When your nose is asking your mind, have you just gone mad? We've been through this before, and you know that last time when I went through this, I didn't pick up anything that was pleasurable. Last time we went through this, it was absolute torture. There was rotten eggs last time. Why do you even think that it's going to be anything good this time round? But the mind saying, well, I'm not really concerned what it smells like. I just want to know what the smell is. And then your nose becomes a slave. You should know by now that this is something that is so true in your own lives. How many times have you done this? This is why I say, Nibbana has to be practical. And if you're all laughing, listen to this, then really, who are you laughing at? We're all laughing at ourselves, knowing that this is how we've done it so many times. Knowing that it was never the smell. It really didn't matter what it smelled like, because that's not what the mind is after. The mind is vexing. The mind is vexing because it wants to know. Vedana and Sanya. It's just dying to pick up that sensation. It's just dying to get to know what's going on and give it a label. So when the mind's dying to do that, the mind is so in such a state of unrest, so unrelaxed, it's so vexed, that's the word for it, it's just vexed, then relief from vexation, the mind believes, can only happen in one way, and that is, I have to smell it. So open nose, sniff sniff, now I know what it smells like. And at that very moment, you've just taken that smell, the mind has been relieved of vexation. But immediately the mind realizes, oops, that's not a smell I like. Now run. But why did you have to take the sniff in the first place? See, this is what we really need to think about. This is what we need to think about. How many times have you touched something that you shouldn't have touched? Something that was hot. When there was a label, when there was a warning, hot, do not touch. What did you do? You touched it. Why? Because the moment it says, do not touch, now you've just been told something. You've just been told not to do something. Do you like being told not to do something? Well, we all know the answer to that. No one likes to be told not to do something. Because what does that impinge upon? Well, your freedom, right? So, when you're told not to do something, now the mind goes into vexation again. Hey, what right does he have to tell me to do this and not to do that? I'm going to show him who's boss. So, the mind again goes into a state of vexation. I want to know what's going on. I want to know whether it's hot or not. And, there's a self I'm trying to cater here. Hello, there's a self that I'm trying to feed here. This self-procreation has to happen. I'm better than you. How dare you tell me what I'm supposed to do and not? I can make my own choices. So, what's the best way to prove this? Let's go ahead and touch it. Well, after you've touched it, now it's too late. You've just burnt yourself. And then you can regret at leisure. Just think about it, ladies and gentlemen. And children, how many times have we gone through this experience in our lives? How many times? Have we learned anything from that? Do we still not finding ourselves going through the same experiences? And another example is for some who, for example, if you have diabetes, or you have cholesterol, or you have high blood pressure, there will be a list of food items that your doctor will have advised that you do not even look at, let alone eat. Yeah? There will be a list of food items that your doctor will have warned you against taking. So, particularly if someone has diabetes, then sweets is something that the doctor says, do not even think about it. If one's got cholesterol, then all those fatty foods, the doctor will probably say, do not even think about it. If you're overweight, if you're obese, then the doctor will probably say, fatty foods, keep away from them, do not. But what happens? Now what's good for the body is to stay away from all that. What's good for the self, what's good for the body is to stay away from the sugars. What's good for the body is to stay away from the salts. What's good for the body is to stay away from the fats. But what do you think the mind's going to do? A mind that is still attached to that taste, the taste of salt, the taste of sweet, the taste of fat. What does the mind do? The mind will just employ your body as a slave and just go, I don't care what the doctor said, I don't care how you look, buddy, I just want to eat, and that over there looks so yummy, so open up and do not talk back to me. Just open up and take a bite. And then what does the body say? But sire, I'm going to be suffering after this. I'm going to have to run. I'm going to have to run a whole 3 hours at the gym on the treadmill after I go to the gym tomorrow if I eat this. What does the mind say? Not my problem. That's not my problem. I just want to relieve myself of vexation. And what does the mind say? Well, pleasure exists in the food. Pleasure exists in the taste. So if pleasure exists in the taste, if pleasure exists in salt and in sweet and in fat, then surely that I have to consume that. I don't care what's going to happen to you. You worry about your own thing. I just want to take my tastes in. That's all I need. I don't care what's going to happen to you. How many times have you found yourself in this situation? Children and adults equally. How many times have you found yourselves in this situation? You know very well that that chocolate in your fridge is forbidden for someone of your state of health. You know that. You know that. You've been advised of that so many times. You even got a sticker on the fridge says, Tati, do not touch the chocolate. But are you able to fight the temptation? No, you succumb to the temptation. But why the temptation? You see, if you are someone who succumbs to temptation, ladies and gentlemen, how can you say you're a free person? How can you say you're a free man? Do you remember free man from last week? How can you say you're a free man? You're a slave. And you thought slavery is a problem that does not exist any longer? You think slavery existed in Africa? You think that's where slavery existed and now there's no more slavery? Well, there's a slave in the mirror. Go and look in the mirror. You'll see the biggest slave ever. Seriously, think about this. Do you not succumb yourself to temptations, and in doing so bring upon yourself torture, bring upon yourself so much pain? Think about it seriously. Would you rather spend 3 hours at the gym, or would you rather spend 3 hours with your family, with your children, with your husband or your wife? But you don't have a choice now. You don't have a choice now because when you did have a choice, you made the wrong choice. Therefore, now you don't have a choice. When you did have the choice of, this is not good for me, resist the temptation, you made the wrong choice. You went for it. You grabbed it. You put it into your mouth, and then it was too late. All this is because of ignorance. All this is because the mind is ignorant about the fact that pleasure does not exist in taste. So then how did you experience that pleasure when you ate that those French fries? How do you enjoy that? How did you experience that pleasure? I know these are the things that people are so attached to. How do you enjoy that when you had a tub of chocolate ice cream all by yourself? You don't even spare a little bit for your younger brother. How dare you anyway? How could you do that? That's besides the point anyway. When you went through that entire tub of chocolate ice cream, all 2 liters of it, how could you do that? Because you thought pleasure exists in the taste. But what really happened? All the adverts, your friends, they told you, they put this view into your mind. It might not have been in this birth alone. It could have been in previous births as well, from a long time in samsara. Because actually, if you take a toll, if you do a survey of all people in the entire world, you're probably going to find that most people enjoy the taste of, or find the taste of sugar more pleasurable than perhaps the taste of, the bitter taste, or perhaps salty taste. They're going to enjoy taste of sugar more than others. Now, one reason for this is actually because, going back to when the Brahmas came, now this is, if you don't believe in rebirth, and if you don't believe in the origin, then you can forget about this, and I'll come to the second point later on. But for those who have some belief, like myself, when the Brahmas came into this world, this is from the Aganya Sutra, in this it's a discourse in the Tripitaka. When the Brahmas came into from the Rupavachara Brahma worlds, the very first Brahmas set foot on the human world, the ground was made of something like sweet chocolate, and they found, and that became their food over time. I know you're probably thinking, what a load of, yes, I know that's what you're probably thinking. This is why I said, if you don't believe in it, then that's okay, you can put that to a side. But if I were to offer you something that you can find more palpable, then just think about it. From the day you came into this world, what taste was most things that you were given to eat? Whether it was baby biscuits, baby food, fruits, soft fruits that were given to you from a young age. A lot of fruits have fructose, which is the sugars that you find in fruits. And a lot of biscuits and baby foods, all of them, they have a more sugary taste, a more sweet taste than any other taste. It was actually only quite later on in life, apart from, I think mother's milk, which tastes a little bit bitter. I can't remember this, but I'm informed that this is the case from having watched some documentaries when I was a lay person. Apparently the colostrum tastes bitter, but besides that, a lot of the tastes that we have come to pick up are sweet. So as a child grows up, this is what they are. This is what gets thrown at them: sweet, sugar taste. So they grow up in a world of sugar, in a world of sweet, and that's what they find more pleasurable than most things. So this is what happens. So when that is the case, the mind has just been programmed. It really is programming a mind. The mind has been programmed by the Asat Purushas. The mind has been programmed to accept sweet as being a more pleasurable taste than others. Now, there is the exception, of course. There are some people who do not like sweet. There are some who like salt better, or it could be bitter taste better. I should be careful not to slip on a tongue twister, but this happens. So, but generally speaking, as I'm sure you'll all know, if you were to do take a survey at home, I'm sure you're going to find that most people like sweet among the other 3 or 4 basic tastes, and this is one of the reasons behind that. So anyway, we pick up these tastes as being pleasurable from a very young age, and then as we grow up, they are put into our minds, and then they begin to cement in our minds, and then when that happens, the mind is now attached to sweet taste. So when the mind is attached to it, the mind now goes into a state of vexation, because it's always looking for it. And when the mind's looking for it, the mind finds relief from the vexation of looking for it when that taste is received into the mind. How does a taste go into the mind? Do you put sugar into your mind? No, the mind can't accept sugar, but what happens is your tongue obviously has receptors on it, which has those receptors have shapes which are complementary to the shapes of the molecules of the food that make up these tastes, and when those complementary shapes fit, then these receptors get triggered, and obviously that sends impulses through your nervous system into your brain, and that into your mind, and this is obviously how your brain passes on Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana. Obviously in this case it's going to be Rasa Rupa, and when Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana into your mind, and then the mind senses that what I have just received is either sweet, salt, sour or bitter. But when it's looking for sweet, and then it's been relieved of that vexation, then it finds pleasure. In fact, to think about it, I recall from my days of studying human biology that because the brain is, or because the tongue is formed in such a way whereby, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of you who know this as a fact, the tip of the tongue is more sensitive to sweet tastes than the other bits of the tongue, right? And then there's the rear of the tongue, so the back end of the tongue is more sensitive to bitter taste. I think the either side of the tongue is more sensitive to sour taste, and then I think bitter is somewhere, or rather salt is somewhere in between. Anyway, let's just take sweet for the time being. So the tip of the tongue is more sensitive to sugar taste. I'm trying to prove to you again, once again, yet again, that pleasure is in relief from vexation and not in the object, not in the food, not in the taste. Okay? So you're now looking for pleasure when you eat sweet, but it's the tip of the tongue that has a greater concentration of sweet receptors. So what might happen if you rewired the tongue? In other words, what would happen if you would rewire the impulses from the tip of the tongue into the bit of the mind where it, let's say you rewire the tongue in terms of the nervous system, you rewire the nervous system whereby signals that come from the tip of the tongue, which are supposed to be picking up sugar, go to the bit of the brain where it actually picks up bitter. So where it's supposed to pick up sweet, sorry, I think I got it wrong the last time. So the tip of the tongue where it's supposed to pick up sweet, you rewire the nervous system that's attached to the tongue, whereby when sweet touches the tip of the tongue, and then the sweet receptors are triggered, impulses are taken to the area of the brain that's responsible for taste, but in particular the area which receives bitter taste. Now what might happen? When you touch the tip of the tongue with some sugar, what are you going to sense now? Not sweet. You're going to sense bitter taste. Now, if you don't like bitter taste, how are you going to feel right now? Pleasurable or unpleasurable? Of course you're going to feel unpleasurable. But what is it that just touched the tip of your tongue? It wasn't bitter. It was sweet. It was sugar. It was sugar that touched the tip of your tongue. But what we've managed to do now is rewire the nervous system that is responsible for transporting those signals from your tongue to your brain, and in doing so, when sugar touched the tip of your tongue, you're now sensing bitter, and now you start your face goes all queasy, and you're not enjoying that experience. So was it sugar then that brought you pleasure? Well, on this occasion sugar didn't bring you pleasure. But what happened? You were looking for sugar, you were looking for sugar taste because you liked that, but you put sugar on the tip of your tongue, what you got was bitter. Now, because the mind is attached to the taste of sweet, it didn't receive that, and therefore it goes into a state of suffering because it was not able to relieve itself from vexation. But the food that was put on the tip of the tongue was sweet. So if pleasure exists in sweet, in the food, then surely you should be able to enjoy pleasure every single time. But you see, that's not what happens. So again, it's just proof yet again that pleasure is not in the food. It's not in the taste either. Because some people in this world, they don't like sweet chocolate, they like bitter chocolate. Because and then there are others who have no sugar problems, as in they have no ailments as a result of which they are not supposed to take sugars, but still they don't like sugar in their tea. I remember that when as a young boy, I really liked sugar in my tea, but as I was growing up, I stopped taking sugar with my tea, and then I started to take it without sugar, and then I grew to like my tea without sugar in it. So when sometimes people would put sugar in it, I didn't like that very much. But growing up, I didn't drink tea without sugar. So you see how that changed. So if taste was in the food, then how would I today be able to enjoy something that I wasn't able to enjoy back then? Now another example, a lot of young children, they don't like leaves. Leaves that go into a salad. Okay, people don't like to eat salads. Sometimes mallum is a dish that we have prepared in Sri Lanka and other countries. I don't know what you call it in English, but mallum, right? When we go to Gola mallum or mallum like that, right? A lot of young children don't like the taste of that, and I for one didn't like it at all. My parents had a really tough time trying to feed me leaves, but growing up, I really began to like it. And now, when as a grown-up adult, when people used to serve me leaves, or when we used to cook it at home, I used to serve myself plenty. Sometimes I used to eat half my plate would be rice and curries, and the other half would just be green leaves, because I really liked it. But growing up as a young child, I detested the taste of it. I absolutely didn't like it. It was bitter, it wasn't sweet, and I just couldn't stand the taste of it. But then how did the same taste over time bring me pleasure? So could good taste be in the food? Could there be something called a good taste out there? Well, that simply cannot happen, because if that were the case, then surely growing up I would not be able to take on new tastes. I would not be able to enjoy new tastes, or I would not be able to enjoy something that I earlier on did not enjoy. Yet again proof that pleasure is not in the object, pleasure is not in the food, pleasure is not in the taste. So where is pleasure then? It's in the sight, right? Is it in the sight? No, it's clearly not in the sight. Is it in the sound then? No, again. Is it in the smell then? No. And is it in the touch? No. So sound, smell, taste, sight and touch, none of these things brought us any pleasure. And when the body receives sight, sound, smell, taste and touch, our nervous system picks these up from our sensory organs, takes it to the brain, and the brain delivers a packet of Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara, and they go in packets like photons, right? So a packet of Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana is delivered to the mind. So that's a sense impression left on the mind, and now the mind is able to experience Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana. So that is all the mind is able to experience. So when you're looking at a laptop, for instance, or your computer screen right now, if you're watching this YouTube transmission, or if you're listening to it, when you listen to these words, every syllable, every word you hear me say is ultimately Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana in your mind. Every picture you see changing on your screen, whatever picture you're looking at, when your mind accepts that, when your mind receives it rather than accept, when your mind receives it, it's receiving a packet of Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana and nothing else. So the only way that the mind is able to say, I like these pictures, I don't like the other pictures, I like such tastes, I don't like other tastes, I like these smells, I don't like other smells. Remember, the mind is not able to take the outside smell or the sight or the touch or whatever. All the mind is able to take is Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana. So that's all it knows about. It doesn't know about anything else. So if that's all it knows about, then surely that's all it's attached to. It's not attached to the outside world object directly. What it's directly attached to is the Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana that arise within the mind. And that is why they call the aggregates, or the 5 aggregates and the 5 clinging aggregates. When it becomes skanda, Rupa skanda, Vedana skanda, why does it become an aggregate? Because the mind cannot perceive an individual packet of Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana. It doesn't work like that. Because the mind flows at such a fast rate. It's like if you were to stand by the river, or if you were to open the tap, right? Go and stand by your sink and open the tap. Not now. You're listening to the sermon now. Later on. If you're standing by your sink and open the tap, and you see water rushing down from the tap, from the faucet down to the sink, can you count how many drops of water? Not when it's dripping. I mean, when the water is flowing. You open the tap fully and now the water is flowing. Can you count how many drops of water that is flowing? No, clearly you can't. Likewise, when the mind is operational, when the mind is active, none of us can count how many thoughts arise and pass away. But in each of these thoughts, there's a packet of Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana arising, and with the demise of that thought, with the demise of that chitta, the death of Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana, the passing away of it. So arising and passing away, arising and passing away, arising and passing away. Since when? From the time you started your journey in samsara. And when was that? Which year was that? Don't ask me. And for how long is this going to continue? Because there's no answer to that question. You can look back as far as you like, and then there's still going to be an infinitely long journey from that point back as well. This is why I say don't ask me, because we don't have an answer to that question. But really it doesn't matter that there's no answer to the question. A lot of people really get stuck here. They say, well, if Buddhist philosophy does not teach me how I began, how I came into this universe, then I'm not interested. Well, oh yes, I feel so sorry for them. Someone's just, imagine you're walking in the jungle. You're just taking a walk in the jungle, okay? You get hit stuck with an arrow. And this arrow has poison on its... it's got poison. So this arrow has... You've just been stuck with the arrow, and it's got poison on the tip of this arrow. Now, this poison is going to start seeping through your body. You tell me, what's going to be your biggest concern right now? Is it going to be... Who shot this arrow? Where did it come from? Who did they target? Why did they target me? Is that what your biggest concern is going to be? Or is it going to be, how the hell do I get this arrow out of me? Which one is it going to be? I think the answer is pretty obvious if you're not a born fool. If we are not idiots, then the answer is pretty obvious. We have zero concern really, for as long as that which has to concern us utmost, which is, how do I get this arrow out of me? For as long as I have not done that, then really where it came from, who shot this, why did they pick me, what were they really targeting, was it just a bad omen? None of this really matters, because for every moment you spend trying to find the whereabouts of this, trying to find the origin, you're just a dying man and the clock's ticking. You've got so much time left before you die, because it's poison seeping through your body. So that has to be the biggest concern, not where it came from, who shot it, why did they pick me when I'm the... when there's a guy standing next to me, he could have picked him himself instead. Why me, right? That should not be your biggest concern. And quite honestly, when people come to me and they say, right, Swaminatha, unless you tell me where I came from, I'm not going to listen to anything else you say. My response to them is usually, well, thank you very much for visiting us. Have a nice day. Because really they've come for the wrong thing. This is not what Buddhist philosophy is for. It's not for how it all began. Buddhist philosophy is for how do we make it all stop? Where is the end? How do we bring it to an end? So we're talking about chittas arising and passing away, right? Ever since this process started, it was always been a packet of Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana, and for the last chitta that's going to arise for all of you in samsara, which is going to be that chitta through which you enter parinibbana. That's going to be the last chitta you are ever going to have in this samsara. Even that last chitta is going to be, so it's going to be a vipaka chitta for all of us, a resultant chitta, but all those chittas are going to contain a packet of Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana and nothing else. So if this is all the mind is able to perceive, Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana, then clearly the mind is not able to attach itself to anything else apart from Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana, and this is why we talk about them. So if that's what we are attached to, then that's what we need to remove our attachment to. And to remove attachment, that is not something that happens by magic. You can't go abracadabra and no more attachment. You can't go hey presto and no more attachment. Attachment is rooted in ignorance. Where there is ignorance, there's always going to be attachment. And what is ignorance again? Ignorance is not knowing. It's lack of understanding, lack of comprehension that Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana are not pleasurable. It's the lack of that wisdom. It's the lack of that comprehension. Ignorance is accepting that Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana are pleasurable. That they have pleasure, that pleasure is to be had in Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana. That it brings joy. That continued existence in samsara for the purpose of Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana is worth it. These are all thoughts that are based in ignorance. So one day, when we have all perfected our knowledge, perfected our wisdom, perfected our understanding that never did Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana bring us any pleasure, never did it bring us any joy, never is it going to be a useful thing, a worthwhile thing to do, to keep going round in samsara, looking for Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana which has pleasure. The day we come to that knowledge, the day we come to that comprehension, that wisdom, is the day when we will no longer have cause to take us in samsara. That will be the end of our journey. So this is what our target has to be. This is what we need to continuously remind ourselves, continuously discuss and talk about, and nothing else really. Because you see, for as long as you and I are vexing, for as long as there are objects in this world that can bring us displeasure, again, is it the object that brings it to us? No, clearly not. It's the attachment through which, or it's attachment that means we are subject to the vexation, and the objects are simply vexatious. So for as long as that is the case, then we are going to be vexing. And for as long as we are vexing, I really don't see the point in concerning ourselves about anything else. Because how often do we vex? Once a year? Is it once every leap year? Is it once a fortnight? Once a day? Well, if it's once a year, then I suppose the rest of the year we can talk about other stuff. We can talk about our origin, we can talk about the stars and the universes and all the galaxies out there, and how beings are so different from each other, and how beings come into being, and every other thing. And we can go and study the Abhidhamma, and we can go and study the Tripitaka, and spend time in studying all these books and scriptures. But I don't see any point in that. Not while I'm still vexing. The day I'm not vexing, be my guest. The day I'm not vexing, the day we are not vexing, well, let's go and make it our quest. Let's go on let's host a party. Let's open up a university where we can learn about the entire universe. But not until then. Not until I'm vexing. For as long as I'm vexing, there's only one problem that I'm trying to solve for myself. Because I know that it's my ignorance that still tells me that Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana are pleasurable. I know for a fact that they are not, but still such thoughts come to mind. And for as long as this is the case with you, what we need to do, what we all need to do, is to continue to reflect on that. Every time we experience something pleasurable, it's a time for us to do meditation. Oh, hang on, I just said the M word. Meditation. That's not something we have to do all the time, right? Surely meditation is something you do on a Saturday morning. You go to a meditation class. That's where meditation has to happen. I just said the M word. No, that's not true. Meditation is something we have to do all the time. What, sitting down cross-legged? There may be times when you have the luxury and freedom of the time to do that, but no, you don't have to do that to do meditation. It's reflecting, contemplating. All those moments where you enjoy, you sense pleasure. That's a moment to practice your meditation. And all those moments where you sense suffering, anger, resentment, pain, not physical obviously, mental. These are all moments for you to reflect on, analyze and contemplate on the doctrine. These are all moments during which you have to practice meditation. So this is what we ought to do. So for as long as we are still vexing, ladies and gentlemen and children, for as long as I'm vexing, this is all I'll be thinking about. Because that is the biggest problem I'm trying to solve. This is the curse of my life. I have no other time. I have no time to look at other things because this is the curse of my life. This is the bane of my life. I'm vexing. The reason I'm vexing is because I'm attached. Because of attachment. Attachment to Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana. And therefore the onset of the 5 clinging aggregates. This is what I'm trying to put a stop to. With every passing moment, precious human life is ticking me by. Precious time that I have to reflect on this, precious time that I have to contemplate on this, precious time I have to eradicate my attachment is ticking by. Excuse me. So therefore, I don't have time to waste to go look for other avenues, go look for other paths to get into this river. I have found a path to the river. It's crystal clear. I can see how it's going to take me to Nibbana, and I have no time to go exploring because that is not my paramita. My job is to take instruction from my teachers, from my master, from the Supreme Buddha, who went and himself discovered all the paths there are to get into the water. And among those paths, thanks to my teacher, I was able to find the path for myself, the path that was right for me. And having discovered that my purpose of existence now is to fulfill that path and to put a stop to all suffering. So, for as long as that job is undone, remains undone, for as long as that duty remains undone, duty not to anybody else, duty to myself, for as long as that obligation to myself remains unfulfilled, I have no other purpose. I have no other interest. I have no other gain to seek in life. And I think that is how we should all be. So, in conclusion, I want to re-emphasize what I said at the beginning. If you have begun to understand at least, if you are beginning to see a path, if a path is beginning to pave for you, if it's beginning to become clear at least, that This vexation is what we all need to try and put a stop to. And the cause for all vexation is attachment. The cause for attachment, all attachment is rooted in ignorance. Ignorance that Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana are pleasurable. Eyes, ears, nose, tongue and the body that bring us inputs from the outside world are pleasurable. The very inputs from the outside world, sight, sound, smells, taste and touch, that they're pleasurable. For as long as this is our view, for as long as this is our perception, and for as long as this is what our consciousness is rooted in. So, this distorted perception, distorted view and distorted consciousness, conscience even, for as long as we have this distorted mentality, you and I are in samsara. You and I are suffering. The cause for all suffering is attachment. To rid ourselves of suffering, we have to rid ourselves of attachment. Attachment never brought us any happiness. In your day-to-day lives, in your day-to-day experiences, you may feel that, hey, no, attachment does bring us happiness. Well, guess what? This is what you thought all the way through samsara. And look where it got you. You came through in samsara with the view, with the belief, with the perception, with the conscience that attachment brings us happiness. Are you happy right now? How long did you come through on this journey in samsara with that distorted view, perception and conscience? How long did you come through in samsara? How many births? How many years? How many hundreds of years? How many hundreds of thousands of years? How many millions of years? Hey, no. How many trillions of years? I've got one better. How many incalculable eons have you come through in samsara? Taking distorted view, distorted perception, distorted conscience, that sight, sound, smells, taste and touch are pleasurable. The eyes, ears, nose, tongue and touch or body is pleasurable. Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana that arise in the mind as a result of these two coming into contact are pleasurable. This is how you came through in samsara. For such a long time, all you did was look for pleasure. All you did was look for happiness. I have a question for you. Are you happy now? Shocking, isn't it? Sickening, I think is the word. It's literally sickening. Now's the time to come to our senses. Now's the time to put a stop to this nonsense. Now's the time to bring this useless, endless, meaningless journey to a stop. Because a journey on which you go looking for pleasure through indulgence in sensuality is not one you're ever going to finish. It's not one you're ever going to end, because there is no destination to it. If that is the success you seek, then I would agree that success is a journey, not a destination. But if the success that you seek is the same success that I seek, as much as the same success that all noble ones that came into this world sought, and that is success in putting an end to all attachment, putting an end to all ignorance, then that success has a destination. That journey has an end. And that end is Nibbana. I wish and hope that may through the course of this sermon you are all able to achieve some understanding, fill any gaps in your knowledge, support your firm resolve to achieve that supreme bliss of Nibbana. So, before we conclude the sermon then, let us all take a moment to recite the Arya Maitri. I think it was in English last time round, so we will do that in Sinhala this time, and then we will transfer the merits that we have all acquired, and we'll bring the sermon to an end. Mamada siyalu loka siyalu satmayo sansara dahayen midetma sansara rogayen midetma sansara bhayen midetma sansara anduren midetma sansara ginnen midetma Nibbana parama sukhayen sukhitattara vetva Nibbana parama sukhayen sukhitattara vetva Nibbana parama sukhayen sukhitattara vetva Mamada siyalu loka siyalu satmayo raga bandhanayen midetva dvesha bandhanayen midetva moha bandhanayen midetva mara bandhanayen midetva Nibbana parama sukhayen sukhitattara vetva Nibbana parama sukhayen sukhitattara vetva Nibbana parama sukhayen sukhitattara vetva Mamada siyalu loka siyalu satvayo jati ginnen midetva jara ginnen midetva vyadhi ginnen midetva marana ginnen midetva Nibbana parama sukhayen sukhitattara vetva Nibbana parama sukhayen sukhitattara vetva Nibbana parama sukhayen sukhitattara vetva Mamada siyalu loka siyalu satvayo shoka ginnen midetva paridevayen midetva dukkha ginnen midetva domanassayen midetva upayasayen midetva yam pitchang labati tampi dukkhayen midetva sankitena panchopadanakkhandayen midetva Nibbana parama sukhayen sukhitattara vetva Nibbana parama sukhayen sukhitattara vetva Nibbana parama sukhayen sukhitattara vetva Kamaloka anatai එයින් මිදෙත්වා රූප ලෝක අනාතයි එයින් මිදෙත්වා අරූප ලෝක අනාතයි එයින් මිදෙත්වා සියලු ලෝක අනාතයි එයින් මිදෙත්වා අතහැරීම නාතයි අතහැරීම වෙත්වා නොඇල්ම නාතයි නොඇල්ම වෙත්වා මිදීම නාතයි මිදීම වෙත්වා නිවනම නාතයි නිවනම 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 වෙත්වා නත්ති මේ සරණං අඤ්ඤං බුද්ධෝ මේ සරණං වරං නත්ති මේ සරණං අඤ්ඤං ධම්මෝ මේ සරණං වරං නත්ති මේ සරණං අඤ්ඤං සංඝෝ මේ සරණං වරං නත්ති මේ සරණං අඤ්ඤං නිබ්බානං පරමං සුඛං. Okay. So then, before we conclude the sermon, let us all prepare ourselves to transfer merits to all those who deserve these merits, reminding ourselves once again that the reason that we are all able to be here today, to listen to this sermon today, one of the reasons that we are so fortunate and privileged to be listening to these sermons today is because there are many countless, immeasurable sentient beings who have been generous and so generous in their help, support and assistance in times of hardship on our part. So it is only right, it is only the right thing to do, the just thing to do, that we take a moment to transfer the merits to all those who deserve these merits. So, first and foremost, let us remind ourselves once again that it is the Supreme Buddha's Dhamma that we have the privilege of discussing today, understanding, comprehending and using as our tool and the path to redeem ourselves from the shackles of samsara. Therefore, let us take a moment to transfer these merits to the Bhikkhu, Bhikkhunis, Upasaka, Upasikas, who throughout many hundreds and thousands of years protected and preserved this Dhamma for the benefit of all future beings and sentient beings like you and I. It is thanks to their sacrifice, sometimes with their last breath, to protecting and preserving the Dhamma that today we have the Tripitaka in its current shape and form, in order that we may practice the Dhamma, discuss the Dhamma, understand and comprehend the Dhamma to redeem ourselves from the shackles of samsara. May all those Bhikkhu, Bhikkhunis, Upasaka, Upasikas be able to rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. If any of them have been born in the woeful planes, may these merits help them to be born in the blissful planes. May through the power of these merits they all abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the Noble Eightfold Path and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us all take a moment to transfer merits to all the members of the Mahasangha, the Mahanayakas, the Anunayakas, the chief prelates of all the chapters in Sri Lanka, as well as throughout the world, all members of the Mahasangha who represent the Mahasangha in any way in all forms and responsibilities that they hold. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. Let us also take a moment to remind ourselves of the monks and nuns of our local temples and nunneries. Although today you may listen to our sermons at the Dharmayai Obai monastery, perhaps you come along and offer alms and so on and so forth. Let us not forget that it is the monks and nuns of our local temples, our local nunneries that have always been by our sides. It is they who have always been through your hardships. We said it is always they who have been through the tough times in your lives, been there to help you, support you, assist you, and provide you with guidance to lead good and respectable lives in the face of misery, in the face of hardship. So may the power of all the merits that we have all acquired today be transferred to them. May through the power of all these merits they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and be able to render the tremendous service that they have always been doing very many years into the future in order to protect and preserve the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, these three jewels, as well as may through the power of these merits they be able to attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Also let us take a moment to transfer the merits that we have all acquired today to the Devas, Brahmas, spirits, demons, and the dead that we invited at the start of this sermon. May they all be able to rejoice in these merits, as well as let us also take a moment to transfer merits to all our ancestors who might have predeceased us, all those ancestors who might have been a mother, father, brother, sister, an uncle, an aunt, a nephew, a grandparent, so on and so forth, perhaps even a friend or perhaps a teacher, who throughout our encounters in samsara they have been at our service, perhaps, or perhaps volunteered themselves to be at our support, volunteered themselves to support us, help us, provide us with assistance in any way, shape and form that they could. May they all be able to rejoice in these merits. If any of them have been born in the woeful planes, may these merits help them to abstain, to redeem themselves from those woeful planes and be born in the blissful planes. May through the power of these merits they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also take a moment to transfer merits to our parents in this birth as well as in our previous births, our parents who have done so much for us to bring us up in the best way that they could, to provide us with a good education, to bring us up in the best upbringing that they could afford for us, as well as our parents in our previous births, and as well as parents who may have deceased by now. It is perhaps their sacrifice that led to our being born in the human plane, in the blissful plane. Perhaps they sacrificed themselves and committed unmeritorious deeds for which today they are paying dues, or perhaps suffering the consequences in the woeful planes. But it is thanks to their sacrifice today we have been born in the blissful planes. So may they all be able to rejoice in these merits. Let us also take a moment to transfer merits to our teachers, not just in this births but also in our previous births, those teachers who did everything that they could to bring us up and bring us up in a right and orderly fashion, to bring us up to become law-abiding citizens of this country. May they all be able to rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. If any of them have been born in the woeful planes, may these merits help them to redeem themselves from those woeful planes and be born in the blissful plane. May these merits help them to abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also take a moment to transfer merits to the members of the armed forces who sacrificed their lives to protecting and preserving our country, as well as fight a 30-year-old long war in Sri Lanka, and through their sacrifice were able to bring peace and harmony to this country, as well as the members of the police force who made such and similar commitments as well. It is because of them that today we are able to live in peace and harmony with each and every one of us, despite our differences in our beliefs and culture and so on and so forth. May they all be able to rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. Let us also transfer these merits to all men and women who might have lost their lives in the wars that existed and prevailed in our country. Be their friend or foe, if any of them are looking for merits, may through the power of these merits they be able to rejoice in these merits. If any of them have been born in the woeful planes, may these merits help them to redeem themselves from those woeful planes, be able to be born in the blissful planes. May through the power of these merits they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let's also take a moment to transfer merits to all those men and women who might have lost their lives in tsunamis, as well as any other natural calamities that might have happened, not just in Sri Lanka, but throughout the world. If any of them are today seeking merits, may they be able to rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. They might have been friends and family, but also perhaps those beings who might have not been our acquaintances. But nevertheless, if any of them are looking for merits, they have truly in our 91 eons of our existence, the last 91 eons of existence in samsara, they have truly and most certainly come to our support, come to our assistance, come to our help. May these merits help us all to repay the debts that we owe to them. May they be able to rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. If any of them have been born in the woeful planes, may these merits help them to redeem themselves from those woeful planes and be born in the blissful planes. May these merits help them to abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let's also take a moment to transfer these merits to those men and women who have dedicated their lives to protecting and preserving our country, leading our country, developing our country, because if not for them, you and I will today have to be leading this country, protecting this country and developing this country. But it is thanks to their commitment, their dedication, that today you and I have the time, the freedom and the luxury of time to practice the Dhamma, to practice the Noble Eightfold Path and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. So may they all be able to rejoice in the merits that they have all acquired, we have all acquired today. Also spare a moment and transfer these merits to those men and women who are your work colleagues, perhaps your seniors, perhaps your juniors, because it is they who are today looking after your ventures, your enterprises, your businesses, your workplaces, and as a result of which you are able today to listen to these sermons, have the spare time, have the free time to commit yourselves to practicing the Noble Eightfold Path. So may they all also be able to rejoice in the merits that they have all acquired, we have all acquired today. Also anyone who might have prepared a meal such that you are able to sate your hunger, quench your thirst, and therefore be able to listen to this sermon in peace and harmony, in peace and quiet, without any physical discomfort, without any physical hardship. Those beings who might have, those men and women who might have contributed in any way, shape or form to your comfort, to your listening comfort, to building the homes that you are living in right now, or perhaps by contributing in any way, shape or form they could to develop this technology that we use today, to deliver these sermons, to record these sermons, to transmit these sermons to a worldwide audience. Technology such as the internet, computers, microphones, so on and so forth, may they all be able to rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today, because if not for them, ladies and gentlemen, you will not be able to listen to this sermon, certainly not live, certainly not in recorded form or any way, shape or form. So it is they who we have to thank for us being able to listen to these sermons, be able to record these sermons, be able to receive the gift of Dhamma in this shape and form. So may they all be able to rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. From time immemorial, if any of them have been born in the woeful planes, may through the power of these merits they be able to redeem themselves from those woeful planes, be born in the blissful planes, may through the power of these merits they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the Noble Eightfold Path and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And finally, may all the merits that we have all acquired today in listening to this sermon, in preaching this sermon, in taking part in any meritorious deeds that you might have by offering alms to the Buddha, Dhamma and the Sangha, perhaps by offering flowers, lighting incense sticks, lighting an oil lamp in any way, shape or form, or perhaps by contributing in whatever shape or form you could to making this event possible, by perhaps transmitting messages and coordinating this event for the benefit of all other people, all other listeners. May all the merits that we have all acquired today empower and energize many hundreds of thousands of men and women just like you and I to achieve the noble bliss of Nibbana, to become Arahatun Wahanses in this very birth, and may we be able to witness the advent of many hundreds of thousands of Arahatun Wahanses in this very blessed land itself, in our very birth itself. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And finally, may the merits that we have all acquired today enable you and I to become one of those Arahatun Wahanses, one of those Arahat Mehenin Wahanses in this very birth itself, in the era of the Gautama, Supreme Buddha itself. May we all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. The members of the Mahasangha will now transfer their blessings to you. Raga ginnen midatva, Dvesha ginnen midatva, Moha ginnen midatva, Nibbana Parama Sukhayan සුඛිතතර වෙත්වා නිබ්බාන පරම සුඛයෙන් සුඛිතතර වෙත්වා මමද සියලු ලෝක සියලු සත්වයෝ නිබ්බාන පරම සුඛයෙන් සුඛිතතර වෙත්වා නිබ්බාන පරම සුඛයෙන් සුඛිතතර වෙත්වා නිබ්බාන පරම සුඛයෙන් සුඛිතතර වෙත්වා තුනුරුවන්ගේ සුවිසි අනන්ත මහා ගුණ බැලෙන් සියලු ලෝක සියලු සත්වයෝම නිබ්බාන පරම සුඛයෙන් සුඛිතතර වෙත්වා සාදු සාදු සාදු. May I and all beings in all worlds be freed from the fires of desire. May I and all beings in all worlds be freed from the fires of aversion. May I and all beings in all worlds be freed from the fires of delusion. May I and all beings in all worlds attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. May the noble triple gem be with you all. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.